I'm going to finish in a minute, but I would just also want to draw attention to another huge range of literature known as the Puranas, and a range of them here on the shelf over here, both in the original Sanskrit a version and these green coloured volumes as well that you come out. There are a newer publication I've seen in India, which I've got a few copies of at home, but these are the most widespread, widely found translations of the Puranas, and this is the one of the Sanskrit texts, the Varaha Purana. Okay, generally speaking, I would say again the Puranas are not widely read either in translated form or the original Sanskrit, but many of the stories are very well known. There are usually accepted as being 18 Puranas, and the classification is 6 of the 18 dedicated to Shiva, 6 dedicated to Vishnu, and 6 dedicated to Brahma, although that classification is very loose, and if one were to explore the content of the Purana, I don't think it would of the Puranas, I don't think it would it would add up like that. And for example, Brahma is very rarely venerated in any of the Puranas. Maybe a little bit I've read in the beginning section of the Padma Purana, there seems to be a veneration of Brahma, but by and large the Puranas are dedicated either to Vishnu or to Shiva, or on certain occasions and certain passages to Devi, the goddess as well, but it's mainly Vishnu or Shiva. I would say in particular there's a couple of the Puranas which are very, very well known in terms of the content, and I'm talking there about the Bhagwat Piranha. The Bhagwat Piranha contains the well-known stories of Krishna's early life, in particular his childhood, his growing up in Braja, in Vrindavan, and his dalliances with the gopis, the women of the village, which have formed the basis for a very, very significant trend in late medieval Hinduism, the worship of Krishna, which flowered in North India and in South India actually in that late medieval period, is based on and derived from the stories told in the Bhagwat Purana, and these stories are very, very widely known amongst Hindus. There are, of course, innumerable other literatures. We haven't, perhaps we've missed out the Bhagavad Gita, of course. We've got a number of copies of it here with commentaries. I didn't touch on the Bhagavad Gita because, of course, it is a part of the Mahabharata. But if we were to ask most of our Hindu guests who come in here, what is your most important scripture? I think the majority, well, this is my experience, tend to say either the Veda, because of its status as Shruti, or else the Bhagavad Gita. And I think this is fairly widely known and fairly widely read amongst Hindus, because there's a philosophical text which establishes the principal doctrines of Hinduism. I've got a couple of versions here with commentaries. This is the Ramanuja commentary, which tends to be emphasise the Vaishnavism of the Gita, and this one here, Shankaracharya's Bhasya, which emphasises the Upanishadic nature of the Bhagavad Gita. The Gita is, I think, a reconciliation of the devotional tendencies in Hinduism with the notion of dharma, with the philosophical ideas of the Upanishads. It seems very simple in a lot of ways, the Gita, but it is in fact a very, very complicated text, weaving these different strands together, and also written in a beautiful poetic style of Sanskrit. Okay, I don't want to go on too much longer talking about this. We have, I think, touched on the major scriptures of Hinduism, and we will study these in some more detail in future classes. There are, of course, other literatures as well. I mentioned the Tamil literatures, and if we were to go to Tamil Nadu and talk to the Shaivite friends in the temples down there in Ekambareshwar in Kanchi, in Tirukalikandram, etc., they will say that their major scriptures are the Shaiva texts written by the either by the Shaiva acharyas or revealed by Shiva himself. And in fact, they in their Shaivism, they barely pay any reference to these books that we've mentioned at all. They have their own body of literature which exists as almost a discrete religious tradition. They don't deny that. They don't say the Veda's rubbish. Here we've got these Shaiva texts, the Shaiva Agamas. They'll say, yeah, the Veda is fine, but this is where the real religious truth is to be found. I think that can be replicated right throughout India. Again, our friends in London at the Swaminarayan temple, if you ask them what's your major scripture, they'll show the Vachanamritam or the Shikshapatri, which are composed by Swaminarayan himself, and their religious life focuses primarily on those literatures. And I think that situation is replicated throughout India. And so in that sense, to speak of Hindu scripture or to know Hindu scripture is virtually impossible, I would say. We have many great scholars here in Oxford and people travelling from all over the world, but it's virtually impossible to know every aspect of scripture. Someone might know a bit about Upanishads, some people might even know about the Puranas, some people might even have read the Puranas. It does happen. And but to know all about Hindu scripture is a virtually impossible task. It would take several lifetimes. Okay, I think we'll finish there. So, I mean, the basic points I've been trying to emphasise today are, firstly, the role of Scripture, its position as authority within the Hindu tradition, which is, I would suggest, in terms of the living tradition, is somewhat dubious. It doesn't have the same authority status, and I think that often leads to misunderstandings between traditions, because people say, you Hindus believe this because it says in your scripture, and Hindus don't necessarily believe that just because it says in scripture. So we've looked at that, the position of scripture as authority, which is ambiguous, is probably a better word. And then we've just briefly summarised the main scriptures that the Hindu tradition offers, and try to put them in the context of the huge range of religious literature that is available to Hindus themselves and to students of Hinduism, which makes it a fascinating and also a very, very difficult subject. I'm reminded of Professor Van Buitenen, whose theory of expertise from the University of Chicago was the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata alone is absolutely vast. I think it's longer than the Bible. And Professor Van Buitenen concluded, he says something like, the Mahabharata is dismally intractable. You know, it's just impossible to know even the Mahabharata. So to be an expert in Hindu scripture really is something wonderful. It's a lifetime's work, and I think we have to understand it in that way, the vastness of the subject that we're trying to encapsulate in one very short class today. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.